Hello and welcome to the TFF podcast by Fantasy Football Hub, our first episode of the 21-22 season as we talk all things Telegraph Fantasy Football. My name is Fergie and I'm joined by not two but three superb Telegraph Fantasy managers this time around. Firstly, Luke Wilson. How are things with you, Luke?
Yeah, very good. I had a nice summer, so I've not played any fantasy. So yeah, it's good. Good finish in Telegraph, decent finish in Sky. So yeah, it's nice, and then just enjoyed the Euros.
Excited,
yeah,
excited
good.
and raring for the new season, Luke.
Getting there. A bit too busy at work, but yeah, this week it's like Christmas next week, isn't it? So
it is.
Yeah, it's good.
Absolutely right. We also have the Hub's resident statistician, Carl Weeks. Carl, have you had a good summer?
I've had a very enjoyable summer. Yep. Enjoyed the Euros, same as Luke.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to the new season kicking off. Being back in the stadiums itself and actually watching football live is, it's just a fantastic considering the last couple of years we've all been through. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it's going to be a brighter future.
Indeed. As a special treat this time around, we also have the overall champion of the Euro 2020 Telegraph competition, Owen Johnson. So Owen won the whole thing in the summer for the Euros, and he told us a story earlier. Even though being English, he needed England to concede in the final to win the prize, which was an interesting one. Owen, many congratulations. How does it feel to be the champion?
I honestly can't believe it. I didn't think I would be anywhere near the top, let alone win the whole thing. It was very nerve-wracking throughout the whole tournament. But once I got over the line, I really could not believe it.
I can imagine. I mean, none of us have ever come close to winning a fantasy game, have we? Have we, guys?
We haven't, Andrew. No, nobody has. Nobody here.
No. I can.
We're all losers apart from Owen.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine what it felt like, Owen. But many congratulations, and we're all very excited to get your championship insight through as we go through the podcast.
Well, he's won a proper game, hasn't he? That's the thing.
There we go.
Here
it goes. Okay. So for our YouTube watchers, if you haven't subscribed to us yet, please press the subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner of the screen to make sure you don't miss anything. Also, please press the like button if you enjoy our content. So for this podcast, we will firstly take a look at the new bonus point changes for the new season. If you haven't seen them, there are bonus point changes in Telegraph. I think for the first time ever. I do remember a bit like a man of the match thing a few years ago, but we've never had bonus points. So we'll run through kind of what they mean. Carl, as usual, he's got his stats, he's got his numbers, and we will look at how that could impact how we select our teams, because there are some players in the goalkeepers and midfield positions that may be now a bit more viable than before. We will then take a look at last season's points to get some clues on where to look for value for this coming season. We'll then have a look at the fixtures and talk to the players that we fancy and the formations and strategies we will be deploying at the start of the season. We have tons and tons of questions to answer, and we'll finish off by taking a look at our latest drafts just a week before the deadline. So firstly, Carl, so just to explain what the bonus changes are, basically goalkeepers will get 1 extra point for 2 saves in a match. Midfielders will get 1 point for 2 tackles in a match. And the older 5-3-2 formation is back as well. We've got a 7th formation, which, looking at that and looking how we can set up our teams, we'll talk about it later, I'm sure. But for flexibility, that is a bit of a game changer, I think, to be able to go to flit from 5-3-2 to 5-4-1 back to 4-4-2 and whatever else. But Carl, do you want to take the lead on how the bonus points could affect our team selection?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So, first slide hopefully is on the screen, which sort of says impact of the new scoring matrix For those listening on the hub, I will on the pod, I will sort of go through some of the scores. But if you wish to look at the overall the tables yourself, there's a very handy one on fffstuff.co.uk, and the numbers are very similar. On the site that I've just mentioned, they have probably more accurate data than myself, but I've cobbled together the figures from my own data sources, which may not be 100% accurate, but they're pretty good enough.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
So on the goalkeepers, it makes a very big difference because a lot of goalkeepers make, or some goalkeepers make a lot of saves. So the additional points, I'll just sort of like name the top four, is Misley of Leeds, Martinez of Villa, Pope of Burnley, and maybe a little bit of a surprise is Luis of Tottenham would be the top four. And they scored, the bonus system itself gives them 63, 62 for the top two. And then there's a bit of a gap, 50, 45, and then it starts tailing off. And last year's top goalkeeper point scorer was Edison, but he only gets an additional 25 points. So with the new scoring matrix based on last season, he would no longer be top point scorer, and it would be Martinez would overtake him and move to 194 points, whereas Edison would only move up to 186 points. So it makes a big difference on goalkeepers. And you may also have noticed when I go through the list of names, as you'd probably expect, it's the teams that aren't the best, aren't challenging for Champions League places, tend to, you can see goals. Yeah. The goalkeepers are busier, and therefore they probably become more valuable.
Owen, have you taken an initial look, at these numbers, and how are they impacting your select? Who's your keeper selection at the moment, based on what we know now?
Well, I've got about four or five, a short list of 4 or 5 goalkeepers. Ideally, I want someone, obviously, what would keep a clean sheet, but obviously, like the teams outside the top 6 places, like Martinez, Misley, concede a lot of shots from outside the penalty area, so that will bump up the goalkeeper tally. Plus, Villa have such a good start to the season. Yeah. I really like Martinez.
Yeah, I think so. And if you look at the price, 3.8 compared to Alisson, Schmeichel, and Edison, Martinez. For me at the moment, I think he's going to be my win. What do you think, Luke? Who's your keeper of choice based on what we know now?
There's a few options. I think. Well, I'm down to 2. It's either Martinez or it's Sanchez for me. So bearing in mind, Sanchez didn't play probably 40% of the season last season. So if you pro rata up his points, he probably ends up about 160 odd.
Yeah.
Which the price difference then between him and Martinez becomes about the same points per value. But the other point I was going to make is if you look at the new change, so Martinez 3.8 million, 194 points. Like Fernandez last year, 210 points for almost 7 million. So after price, points per million, very interesting, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, so I think the goalkeeper selection, I mean, it's probably a set and forget now. So Martinez with the saves. The other one that, we haven't mentioned is Fabianski, because historically he's always been first or second in terms of overall saves, and he was out injured for a bit of last season. So if West Ham's fixtures start nicely, so he could be. I don't think many people. I can't remember what the number of people selected him, but he was pretty low when I last looked. So Fabianski could be a little dark horse, but it's probably realistically it's probably Martinez or Sanchez, depending on budget, will be my final keeper.
I hadn't really looked
Another,
sorry, Owen. Go.
sorry, another point on keepers, as you will see later, I originally had Meslier in goals, but out of curiosity, I looked at what keepers cost in the bigger teams, and I saw the eye of Man United is only something like 0.3 more than Meslier, and obviously it would keep a lot more clean sheets, so that could be another option.
Really good point there, Owen. Absolutely. Carl, who is your kind of keeper of choice at the moment now based on what we know with the new bonus points?
I always think whatever Luke says is fantastic information.
Now you're talking.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
How much you paying for that, Luke? Jeez.
I don't know what he's after. I never trust people when they're nice to me.
No.
But yeah, it's to me it's a toss up between Martinez and Sanchez of Brighton, taking exactly the same points Luke made. Sanchez only played about 26 games, so when you prorate it up and given his cheapness, I will, as you see, people see my team say, I've gone for Sanchez at this moment in time. Obviously, he had a bit of a knock the other day, so I need to sort of check that out to make sure that he's playing.
Right,
but he's a lot cheaper, and Martinez was fantastic last year. A lot of clean sheets, a lot of saves. I don't know if that's like at the top of his game, whereas I think, well, so he could revert a bit back to the mean. Interesting point that Owen made about the teams that make people shoot from outside the box. Pope would be quite interesting. Right. But they do concede goals, and I don't think they were as sturdy as they used to be, and he's quite expensive as well in comparison to those other keepers. So to me, I think I narrowed my three down to Meslier, Martinez, and Sanchez, with me leaning much more towards Sanchez at this stage.
I mean, I just another point, and I can see us clicking over 3 hours the way I'm going here. But when the player prices came out, the first thing I always look for is where are the bargains in every list. And last year, I mean, I will admit, Fergie, I'm very glad that you didn't take me up on my bet about Meslier at 2 million or 2.1 or whatever it is, but Sanchez at 2.9 is underpriced in my opinion. Yeah. He's, Brighton are a good team. They didn't do as well as they should based on stats. He's underpriced. Martinez is probably priced about right among the other keepers. So, I mean, that for me is the one that jumped out straight away. And when it's about finding that value, 2.9 for a first team keeper and a team that probably will finish mid-table. I mean, I think I'm going to end up there just for the extra money and what you can do with it.
I think as well, like, it's probably the first season where you probably leave your keeper kind of all the way through as well, because normally, you start off on a cheaper one, and then when you see, I don't know, say a run for Liverpool or a massive run of fixtures for Man City or wherever else, you probably look to jump on someone like Edison. But with the save points, actually, there's a very consistent stream of points you come from these keepers, right? Because I think I switched to Edison halfway through the season, but there's absolutely no point in doing it now, is there? I don't think because because of the transfer used.
No, I mean, I
points
do like Owen's point though that both, because I actually think Henderson, in my opinion, is probably the number one for Man United because he was at the end of last season, and De Gea, he's I don't know how he's dropped off a cliff, but he really has him from my eye test. Not that I watch that much football, well, not as much as I'd like to these days. But if Henderson has that number one spot, if you think about how many saves he picked up for Sheffield United in that season, that's what he's good at. And then you stick him with United's defence. I mean, he's 3.6 million, so he's cheaper than Martinez. So I think if I make a transfer, it will probably be for Henderson. But I do agree. Otherwise, I'll probably just stick with Sanchez or Martinez, whichever one I go with at the start.
Okay, so let's take a look now at the midfielders and the tackles. And again, Carl, are you able to just talk us through kind of what it means and who the beneficiaries are from the new rules?
Yeah, I just want to sort of say a couple of things about tackling. It's less clear cut what a tackle is in compared to a save. I assume like a save is the keeper gets some sort of touch on it to divert the ball away from the goal. But a tackle, it's is a successful tackle. So I think we have one set of definitions when they first made the change.
It did.
And we worked off those. And then there seems to be, I think that was like what they classified as a successful tackle or tackle one. And now I think it's changed to a successful tackle where they just they don't have to retain the ball, but they get it away from whoever they're tackling. And we think that is the definition going forward. So there is going to be some uncertainty around this. And it does make a bit of difference what you choose, or they could have some slightly different definition. But based on this, I'll name the top few because there's many more midfielders now, goalkeepers. But the top additional point scorer would be Basuma of Brighton with 43 points. Ndidi, I've got as 41, but FF Staff has got as 43 as well, is second. Then we got Holberg and Tillemans on 37 and 36. And then the list slowly has a gentle falling away. But one thing you'll notice is once you start going through the list, is most of these midfield players are either are more in the center of the park. So you don't see Salah or Mane on there, the type of midfielders which some people say should be forwards. But you do get some surprising ones in there, such as Ward-Prowse, Mason Mount and Bruno. They're picking up about 20 bonus points each because they're trying to win the ball back. If you take away, if it's classified slightly as successful tackle, they wouldn't be as successful as the other midfielders because they don't retain the ball after the tackle. They just get it away from the person who's going forward. It does make a big difference, but again, similar to goalkeepers, it's the cheaper midfielders that have that gain the most. But there are a few more expensive ones, like I've just mentioned, Bruno and Mason Mount, that also pick up the points. So is a bit more spread out in there.
Are there any that catch your eye immediately, Carl? That you're like, oh, he's going in my team now that he's done that. So for just having a look at James Ward-Prowse's points, I mean, he scored well anyway, right? He scored 145 points regardless, but he's also got an extra 28 points, which takes him to 173 points. And Tielemans, surprisingly as well, as shoots up to 182. Who's on your radar, Carl?
Well, I would say somebody who I've got I thought this would come up later, but somebody who I've got on my radar because of the change on this bonus system isn't on that list. Because he's not in the game yet.
Oh, okay.
Shall I give you some clues and see if you can shout out?
Yeah,
when you guess who
He's
this player
not. He's
is?
not in the game yet.
He's not in the game, but he'd be on this list. So he's a midfield player. Last year, he was valued at 2.3 million. He made 28 Premier League starts and 2 substitutes appearances. He scored 2 goals and he had 2 assists. And he had 80 tackles, which would have given him 34 additional bonus points.
80 tackles, did you say?
80 tackles.
Wow.
So I think Basuma, he had about 110. So that's 43 bonus points. So this person would have had 34 bonus points. And he's not allowed to play.
I think on.
He's not allowed to play in the first game week this coming season. He made his debut for his new club in midweek, getting 2 assists away at Reading.
Ryan Bertrand?
No, he's going to be in the game tomorrow at 2.7 million. Conor Gallagher.
Oh, Conor Gallagher. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I know him from Sky. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's coming in at 2.7. He was 2.3 last year. He had 80 tackles and he played a lot fewer games than others. So he's somebody, and he's not playing in game week 1 because Palace are playing Chelsea. But he's somebody I'd be keeping my eye on, and he'd be, I think, going to be good value.
I would never have ever guessed that in my life. Would either of you? Owen, would you have guessed that?
Definitely not.
That's Conor Gallagher. He was decent in Sky, I think, wasn't he? I think we had an eye in Sky because of his tackles.
Yeah.
But okay. Owen, looking at that list, is there anyone who kind of jumps out for you as someone who may make a draft just based on the revised rules?
Yes, there is some, but I think with tackle bonus, a point to make is like if I just make tackles, I probably wouldn't pick them unless I needed an enabler.
Yeah.
And I needed that much amount of money. I'm picking them like Fernandez, mainly because of their attacking ability, and it's a bonus whether or not if they pick up tackles.
Yeah, no, I think I think that's a really good point. Luke, have you got any eyes on these, or are you with Owen just seeing it as purely as a bonus?
No, so there are. I mean, historically, I think I've talked about it before, but Steve Malbronk at 3.8 every season was always my favourite under the radar player, and prices have gone up a little bit, but I hadn't picked up on Ward-Prowse. Not like in Sky. I mean, he's just awesome. Put him in after, so he'll be coming in after Oval, and he'll just be staying for ages. But at 173 points, I mean, I'm interested, and I'm hoping we've got the points per million with the new points.
Yeah.
But just doing the mental maths in my head, at 4.3 million and 173 points, similar with Tielemans at 4.7 and 182. I mean, that's almost a territory where actually sack off Salah and Fernandez, and bring in those two, and you can beef up your midfield. Well, probably not Fernandez actually, but you could probably beef up your midfield and go with 4 really solid sort of 4 to 5 million players who points per million could do you wonders. So I haven't really looked at it. I also like Carl's shout actually, because I've got 2 slots that I'm not 100% sold on in my team with a total budget of about 6 million for 2 players, and it could be 2 midfielders or it could be a defender and a midfielder. So I'm intrigued as to where I go. So I'm sort of, that's the territory I'm shopping in unless I sack off one player. There's also Kane. Does he stay at Spurs? Does he go to City? Which is a major component of what I'm going to do. But yeah, So I think it's really, I mean, it's really interesting. And Basuma, I've seen on Twitter anyway, I've seen in so many people's drafts, and at that 2.8 million price, because I've got a placeholder with Billy Gilmore there at the moment, but his first 5 fixtures are just about as bad as it can possibly be. So if I can find that 0.3 million and get to Basuma from Gilmore, then I probably will, and then find another player to slot in that other position.
But you say his fixtures are bad with Gilmore. Surely that suits Gilmore in terms of getting a tackle bonus, because he's gonna be running around all over the back, tempted to kind of win the ball back. So I'm not, if you're just looking at the tackle bonus, you may be good. But no, I do appreciate it.
Yeah, I did. There's also a question of whether he actually starts the first couple, but Liverpool, Man City, Leicester, Arsenal, first 4. It's like, Arsenal. I mean, that's not that bad, but those first 3, that's, I don't know. Yeah, maybe he will. Interesting. It's a good change. And one point is when we heard the news there was going to be some points, I jokingly put out in our WhatsApp group, it would be brilliant if they bring in tackle bonus, thinking there's no chance. And then they did. It was like, oh, hello.
I know.
So yeah.
It definitely widens the pool of players, doesn't it? You don't have to put rubbish in your team now. You don't have to find the cheapest player of the game just as like a filler, do you? So no, I think it's really positive. Carl, we've got your graph up now showing your line, of how it'll impact. Just want to give us a really brief description of what it means.
Okay. So hopefully, there's 3 graphs I'll go through. I'll skip them quite quickly. Every year, what I try to do is I look at how many points per game somebody gets, and I plot it against your x-axis, which is your horizontal one, of the price of the player. So you'd expect the cheaper the player, the fewer points they'd score per game, and as you buy more expensive players, on average, you'd expect them to score more points. And then I sort of like just draw a best line of fit. So I've done this for the goalkeepers to see what these changes would make. So on the left-hand side is under the old scoring system, what the graph would look like. And then to the right, it's like how this scatter plot looks under the new scoring matrix. And as you can, it's probably not 100% clear to everybody, but to me, the line flattens, which basically sort of saying it doesn't really matter where you're getting as many points if you're cheap than if you're expensive. So this has really made a big difference to go budget. It's basically saying you should be going budget and keeping away from the expensive goalkeepers. So that's that graph. And then the next one after is exactly the same for midfielders. So on the left, we have what the graph would look like for players under the old scoring system, and to the right, what it looks like under the new scoring system. And it does tilt a little bit. So it means there's a little bit more value at the back, so at the cheaper end than there is at the forward end. But that doesn't mean that you can't find good value in some expensive players. But if you just pick randomly expensive or cheap, cheaper is probably better than what it was.
It's really interesting because in my draft at the moment, you naturally just kind of try and get the big hitters in, right? We talk about Salah and as Luke mentioned earlier, Salah, Bruno. I've looked at Havertz and this, and it does make you slightly kind of rethink, rethink your approach that the cheaper players could offer more value.
Yeah, so those graphs in a way should reflect what's above.
Yeah.
And then the third one is where I've done these best lines of fits just to get an idea of what type of formation. So on your graph on the left, it's like what these best lines of fits would have been for each position. And I could basically, the slope of the lines, you could say, are near enough pretty similar pre-changes.
Yeah.
And when you've got the changes in there, you can see the more flattening. So it's as if they sort of said, oh, let's price up players based on the scoring system. And now let's change the scoring system, but not change the price of the players. I'm not saying that's what's happened.
No.
But, it just, so to me, how I read the graph in front of me, it's saying, if you had very limited budget, you go 5 at the back, then midfield, then forwards. And then you look at the slopes of the lines of where it's best to put your extra money, because you have 50 million, not 20 million. So where do you put that extra money? And it's where the slopes go highest. So you don't put any extra money in your goalkeepers, and you don't really put the extra money into the midfield. So you don't, it's sort of saying, spend your money in defence and spend your money on your forward. Don't worry about spending all your money on midfielders unless you find a real gem. And that's how I read those graphs.
Yeah, just if I may jump in. So I think we've always harped on about like points per million, right? It's the most important thing in this game, other than get 3 or 4 for ones because of the FA Cup, right? So save your transfers, that's the second key point. This change, right, benefits goalkeepers, who are always the best value in the game, and it brings midfielders probably in line with defenders. Looking at the second chart, they're not a million miles away, right? So I will not, I don't think, and you'll pick me up on this, but I don't think this season I'm going to move away from more than one striker up front, just purely because if you load the midfield and load your defence now, you've got a set and forget keeper. So you can just rotate whoever that premium striker is or premium midfielders to just get runs of fixtures. But I just think I've seen so many drafts with 3 forwards, which ordinarily I'd be like, no, don't do that. But even on top of that, now you've got all these midfielders who suddenly like 30, 40 points better off. Like literally, if you're listening to this, one bit of advice I can give you other than save your transfers is don't get more than one forward, because all of the value is further back in the pitch. And that's what this game is about. It's about value, not having the flashy players.
It's difficult. So you go, Carl, go on.
Well, I was just going to sort of say, and another point as well on top of that is that you may find that these cheaper midfielders who play for run-of-the-mill clubs may not be rotated as much as these top midfielders who are playing in Europe and may get rested a bit more often as well. So that's also another advantage of going to the formation that Luke mentioned.
I'm sure that regular watchers and listeners would like to take us back a year when we were saying about big at the back is the way forward, and we were very kind of laissez-faire, blasé, whatever you want to call, about being big at the back. And I don't know if you guys remember what happened at the start of the season when Aston Villa beat Liverpool 7-2 and Man United conceded 6 and we very, very quickly moved a lot of cash out, didn't we? I do think that's a one-off. I do think, obviously, with all the COVID, the COVID impact of, no fans in stadiums, a lot of, the games were just like training exercise almost, weren't they? Owen, have you got any concern about that, or do you think that things will go back to the way they were?
I think things will slowly go back to where they were. I think we see this in the Euros. Yeah. Apart from 1 or 2 matches, there was a lot of 1-0s and 2-0s. And I know international football is different to club football, but I still think we're seeing a bit of change in the Euros.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I thought that I didn't play the fantasy Euros, but I did like a predictor, sort of thing. and I found it much easier to predict the score. I did much better in the Euros predictor than I did in the Premier League one last season. I think yeah, I agree with you, and I think it got more to being a bit more predictable, in terms of the majority of the games.
Plus, last season there wasn't really a pre-season.
Yeah, that's a good
And
point.
this season, because of the Euros, it's not been as long as pre-season. So I think to begin with, teams, especially those big teams, will be happy for like a 1 or 2-0 win.
Okay. Okay. Anything more on that, Luke, at all, or Carl? Are we happy to move on? Move on.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so what I've got now on screen are the top point scorers of last season. So I'll just read through the top few each for our podcast listeners. So the top scorer in goal was Martinez, as we say, and then it was Edison. Meslier, Luke. Meslier was the third highest scoring keeper. Never mind the fact he was the cheapest player in the whole game. He was the third highest scoring keeper. Schmeichel and then Lloris. At the back in defence, Chilwell, who's really interesting me, but he's 5 million. He's very, very expensive. He finishes the top scoring defender with 158 points. Ruben Dias was second. Aaron Wan-Bissaka, I was quite surprised when I saw that, but it may be because Luke Shaw maybe missed a few games, but Wan-Bissaka came in third. Andy Robertson came in fourth. Creswell came in fifth. I tend to bunch Creswell in with James Ward-Prowse in terms of they're two players who always go under the radar, but they're such consistent performing, really, really good players. And and Creswell there. Trent is down in a lowly, 7th place. He only scored 138 points last season. And then you got Target, Maguire, and Reece James. Moving into midfield, Bruno Fernandes, who was the second highest scorer. Can I just check, Carl, that does this include the revised bonus points?
Yeah, so this is
awesome.
with the revision.
Cool. Okay. So Bruno scored 226 points. Salah 222. Son 214. Tielemans, the fourth highest scorer in mid with the new change in 182. Sadio Mane, who I think it's probably fair to say that he had a bit of a stinker last year, still managed to score 179 points. And then Ward-Prowse just tucked in there, like nobody's business. And then the strikers. So Harry Kane was the highest scoring player of the game. He's also the most expensive player in the game. 232 points. And then it was Bamford at 190, Vardy 187, Calvert-Lewin 182, and Ollie Watkins. I think he was another one, Luke. I called out Ollie Watkins in our, I think it was like our autumn one or something like that, and you were like, "No, don't go for Ollie Watkins." And
no, I'm gonna defend this. I said the conversation was Ollie Watkins versus Grealish, and at the time Grealish was, I think, was 0.2 more.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Right, and then Grealish got injured. So I'm going to stand by my point that if I had to pick Grealish or Watkins for Villa last season, Owen, I don't know if you're a Villa or a Birmingham fan, by the way, but like I would still back Grealish on a game by game basis. I'm going to have a look at the stats. I can't see if he's there. He's not there. So
well, you would have lost anyway. But we'll move on from that.
Well, courage of my conviction. I'm saying it adamantly enough. I've won.
It's good, mate. And just to touch on these, and so this, we've got the top points per million scorers. Now, actually, we'll skip that one. We'll move on to points per million per game scorers. And points per million per game, we'll ignore Fraser Forster as the keeper because he only played a handful of games. Sanchez came out the highest of the keepers in terms of points per million for the game he played. So what you guys said earlier actually rings true. So 1.58, and then Meslier, and then Martinez, based on their new prices. We can ignore Kepa there. Darlow is actually quite cheap at 2.8, and he was up there, and then you get into the rest there. In terms of defenders, we can probably ignore Phillips because he's not going to play, but John Stones comes in next. Justin's obviously injured. Zuma's probably going to start as Kilman, but Rudiger. So I've got my eye on Rudiger. I can't believe he's only been priced at 3.8 million. He scored 112 points last season. If you bear in mind, he only played half a season, right? He came in when Lampard got sacked. So Rudiger for me is looking very, very undervalued this season. Craig Dawson, Zinchenko, Christensen, Bonner and Mendy. And then going into midfield, Lingard again. These kind of players with Lingard, it's a real shame. He's probably not going to be, he's not going to get much of a game this season, you would guess. Fernandinho is quite interesting there at 3.5 million. He comes in second. Maitland-Niles. Willock is only 3.4 million, and he's on the cusp. He's on the cusp of joining Newcastle for 20 odd million, I think, in Carl. I think that's right. Stuart Armstrong at 3.5. Very, very interesting. He was scored 145 points, Stuart Armstrong. I mean, where does that come from? I would never have ever have guessed that he would have scored 145 points. And I'm assuming, Carl, that includes a bit of a tackle bonus in there as well. Jack Harrison, 4 million, 159. But it's interestingly, Bissouma jumps up now in that table at 2.8. Fornals, Harvey Barnes, Soucek. So that's the midfielders. And then in strikers, the most value striker in the game when he played was Kelechi Iheanacho. 4.7 million this time round, again, which seems ridiculously cheap. I don't know where they get this price from. He's got 136 points. Callum Wilson is 5 million at 125. Then Kane, then Bamford. Benteke comes in this season at 3.8, but could potentially provide value for money. Welbeck. Antonio is one. So you said earlier, Luke, about only playing one up front. I think Antonio at 4.8. He's if he was a midfielder, he'd be in my team. But as a forward, I'm definitely at the moment he's absolutely nailed in my team at 4.8 million. Ferran Torres as well. So they're the strikers, and obviously it gives you a very, very, very different lens, on players to kind of look at for this game. Carl, what are your conclusions based on what you've seen? See, you put all this together.
Well, from the graphs that I showed before, it's I've given my basic 5-4-1 formation. Looking at these figures, it near enough confirms where you get your points per million per pound per game. Sorry, is scoring not better in defence than it is in midfield, and the strikers score quite poorly on that metric. The one thing that is worth remembering, and I remembered it when I done my team, so hence why, is this is all based on last year's scoring. So anybody who sort of like had high variance, like Lingard maybe, they scored really well. And I only say this, so like Liverpool, they only had like 12 clean sheets last year, and therefore you got Robinson and Trent. Even though they're high on the overall point scoring, they're low on this metric. But you'd expect them. I think they're quite cheap if you say if you're considering that they should be getting about 18 clean sheets, which is like what you'd expect from Man City, maybe Man United and Chelsea. And therefore you could consider bumping their score up in your head. But you picked out very similar names to myself, John Stones and Rudiger, because the one good thing about looking at this metric is you've got to use a bit of your knowledge. So like Rudiger is, you think, he should be a mainstay this year, and he didn't hit the previous tables because he wasn't playing because of Lampard. Same with John Stones. Once he was in, he was in. So it's knowing who to strip out and who to take notice of. Like Nacho from Leicester, there's an uncertainty. Whereas Kane, Wilson, and Bamford,
Yeah.
you know, are going to probably play. The midfielders, when I go down that list, you're right. Armstrong, I'd have never guessed, but you know, he'd be someone that I'd think, yeah, I'll delve into him because he is a regular as far as I'm concerned, and he is quite an attacking player, and he probably does get some tackles in. But the ones above that, I would probably ignore because of their game time. All of them, except Willock, you may sort of say if he goes to Newcastle, keep an eye on. But it's Armstrong and a few below that, which I would pick out.
Another one in there, you know, just seen Rafinha to me at 3.9. I think looks, you know, I think he looks quite cheap. Owen, do you like Rafinha?
Yeah, I have him in my team.
Cool.
I believe at the second half of last season, it was so good.
Yeah.
Attacking wise, and also Leeds, their starting 11 is pretty much the same week in, week out.
Yeah.
So you know it will start unless he's injured.
No, that's a really good point. And Luke, is there, you know, anyone on that table which kind of surprises you? I think just for everyone, obviously we're not saying that these players are the best picks, right? So obviously Fernandinho is not, you know, is probably not the best pick. Nat Phillips not the best pick, but what it does, it throws in a couple of players like Sanchez, Stones, Rudiger, Stuart Armstrong potentially, maybe Willock, Bissouma, Antonio. It just throws up these names that, again, you can apply your own kind of level of knowledge to.
Yeah, I'm. See, while we're talking, I'm seriously considering going for a complete differential midfield. Right. So if I look down that list, I'd go for Armstrong, Bissouma, like Souček. Who else we've got? Højbjerg and Ward-Prowse. I think you can guarantee no one else in the world is going to have that midfield, right? But if you look at the points per million, they're all over 38 plus points per million. That's what this game is about. And yeah, I'm not getting Salah, I'm not getting Fernandes, but by God, am I getting decent return on the points? I mean, but I guess the counter argument to that is, do I need to spend the budget on those players? Because it's, you know, I'll end up spending 45 million and getting great points per million, but
not getting exactly.
Yeah.
It's finding the balance, isn't it?
But those five I've just said there, I mean, picking probably three of them. I mean, I really like Ward-Prowse. I mean, Souček, actually, if he continues as he did last season, 3.5 is a great price. So, I mean, if you had, like, say, Souček, I probably wouldn't get Armstrong because I think Southampton could be a bit dodged, especially with Ings having gone. But yeah, I mean, maybe go Souček, good team, solid player, going to play, get Ward-Prowse, and then, you know, I mean, that's two very solid players. You never need to transfer them out. Could be very interesting. Chuck Tielemans in there for a bit more budget, but you'd probably still be able to get Salah and Fernandes. And then, I mean, the strikers, again, I was looking at the strikers. I mean, on Antonio, I don't like in Telegraph because he's so injury prone. And it's just it's a transfer waiting to happen. Yes, he will score big when he's there, but it's a transfer waiting to happen. But players that, you know, there are other, Jimenez at 5.3 million, very underpriced because he had a horror show injury, but points per million, if you look at what he got per game, it's pretty decent. So, you know, I think that there's some serious options if you want to get those slightly higher picks. I don't know if that answers the question, but I'm now really reconsidering my approach for this season. This is
the point of these stats, right?
And another point about teams inside the top six. There's an international break
Yeah.
after game week 3, and players who play in their internationals have maybe a risk of picking up an injury,
Yeah.
or maybe not starting the game week after, whereas more budget midfielders will probably play
That's a really
no
good
matter
point.
what.
Yeah, no, that's really good point. Similar to Carl's point he made earlier as well, right? You know, about the kind of mid-table teams, mids playing a lot more and being kind of less rotated. So that's a really good point there, Owen. Finally, just on this kind of stats bit, then we've got the optimum team, Carl, for last season. Do you just want to explain what this is? It's really interesting. It's always really interesting.
Okay, yeah. So I ran the numbers through an optimizer, and the it came up. So we're talking about, or I'm talking about 5-5-4-1 or whatever. But obviously the optimized team has to be completely different, and it's a 3-5-2. I'll just quickly run through the team. So it's Martinez in goal, and in your three defenders is Cresswell, Target, and Zuma. And in midfield is Salah, Tillemans, Ward-Prowse, Hudson of Leeds, and Susek of West Ham. And up front, it's got Kane and Bamford. Part of the reason, so I was racking my brains, and I was thinking, how come it's coming at spewing out this team, and it's not picking the team that I want it to pick? So I forced it to pick a 5-4-1 or 5 at the back. And it depending sort of drops a little bit, and we've mentioned it before of why 5 at the back doesn't come out optimally, and that's because quite a few of the players, when I start thinking about it, they didn't play the full season. So when we started talking about Rudiger, he only played like half the games. As we sort of said, he only really came in when Frank Lampard got sacked. You had Sanchez, who we sort of talked about in goal, who frees up extra money. He only played half the season.
I think Stone's another as well, didn't he? He didn't. He was another.
So you'd have had those. But if you sort of force it to play 5 at the back, it went Martinez, Cresswell, Target, Mings, Zuma, Kufau. In midfield, Bruno, Son, and Tillemans, and Ward-Prowse, and up front is Kane. So it still didn't quite go as I was expecting it. But that would be about 40 points below the 3-5-2 that it came out with. I do remember when we sort of talked about it in previous years, one of the interesting things is quite often it picks out the fullbacks. I know Zuma's not a fullback, but he's cheap. And I wondered, like, sometimes it's like Zuma, he scored quite well last year, but he's cheap this year because he's not maybe like a first team or expected to play, and therefore it distorts it a little bit.
Yeah. But obviously, we use our own discretion at that, at the price point there, wouldn't we, of a 3.2 and make a thing. But that team looks pretty good, and I'm definitely starting to get some clues already on the kind of players I want. Martinez, Cresswell, Rudiger, Target, Soufal. I think I got him in my current draft. Ward-Prowse, Kane. There's not a Salah. There's not a Salah in sight. Is a scary thing at the moment, but I'm sure we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So moving on then, if you give me a second. Moving on then. So hopefully, we've just looked at at all the stats. So that's kind of looking back at last season and what that kind of does. It sets us up in terms of being able to look forward now and to look at the kind of play we want for Telegraph. So for those of you who are new for Telegraph, it's a very, very different game to the other games. There's no captaincy for one, which is which is absolutely massive, and it's very pure. It's very pure in the way it's played in terms of it generally reflects the performances of the players. There's no bonus points, there's no wild cards, there's no this or that. So your initial starting 11 is very, very, very important. So what we've got now, we've got the fixture ticker up from fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, and we'll just have a brief look at the fixtures, and then what we'll do, gents, we'll just have a bit of a an open mic session around the kind of players that we're interested in, and our kind of strategies and any plans that we've got in terms of players and selections. I know Luke's has gone out the window, he's ripped it up, and he's starting again. But there's still certainly a few.
I've just redone my second team. I'm loving it, actually. Amazing now.
There you go. So
going with this one in the main one, I think. But
so Brighton have got the best fixtures for the first 8. I've done it for the first 8 fixtures. Brighton comes out way on top. So that kind of Sanchez pick, just as an example, he is likely to get off to a decent start. Then it's Man United. Then it's West Ham. Then it's Wolves, Newcastle, Everton, Leeds and Watford. And right down the bottom, Crystal Palace, Southampton, Burnley, Norwich and Brentford. Interestingly, Spurs, Chelsea and Man City are in that bottom half as well, therefore, for the quality of fixtures for the first few games. But a point I made earlier, I do think it's something to think about, right? In terms of when we're thinking about these kinds of players who were looking for tackle bonus very, very specifically, right? In my view, and I think this is borne out because I've seen it in Sky, is generally the poorer the fixture, the more tackles they tend to have to make because they're chasing the ball around all game, right? So Southampton, for example, are right down the bottom, but maybe players like Ward-Prowse, Romeo wasn't in that list, but I know he's in the game at 2.8. He could be another one. Norwich with Billy Gilmore, right? If he's racing round, he's got to race round Anfield. Sorry, they're home against Liverpool. Then he has to race from the Etihad. Then they got Leicester. Then they got Arsenal. I mean, he's going to have to do a lot of tackling in there. Just something to think about. So, Owen, can I come to you first on your? Have you got a kind of a plan in terms of the structure of your team, and who are your initial thoughts on players who you're really interested in?
Well, I think my structure of the team, I'm definitely playing 5 at the back.
And that did you really well in the Euros as well, didn't it?
Yeah, and plus for people who play with 5 teams, they can split the teams. It depends really what your target is. Like if you want to get anywhere near winning it, you have to be a bit gutsy and bank on, let's say, a particular team doing well. Whereas if you spread the options around, yes, you might get an average score, and it might give you a top 1K finish, but it might not necessarily win you a mini league. So it depends what your personal target is.
A really, really good point there, Owen. And yeah, definitely. You look at the teams who kind of fly at the rankings in the first month or two, and it's usually a block team, right? A block defense of, I don't know, in this case, someone may put it, a block Brighton defense or West Ham or Everton, or it may be. And you're absolutely right. I think it's very rare to win the whole game that people have, these very sensible spread teams. So I think it's a really good point to make.
And there's bound to be a player which will have a block in their team and keep 5, 6, 7 consecutive clean sheets. Whereas if you read your defence, you're probably going to lose 10 points or more per game week, and that's 70 points beyond them just on defenders. So it really depends what your ambitions are for a season.
I think that's a really, really good point there. Who are the players who you've got your eye on? Have you got, I don't know, maybe 3 players who you really fancy for the season?
Yeah, obviously Fernandez is definitely in my team.
Right.
For obviously goals and assists, but also tackle bonuses.
Yeah.
I've also a player we haven't touched on. I quite like Mount.
Okay.
But it all depends what position he plays in.
Yeah.
I think it's like mid-budget. But if he plays, say, a really advanced role and like scores 3 goals in the first 4, everyone will be jumping on him.
Yeah.
But if you've already got him, you've already got your points.
Yeah.
And after that, it might not score again for another 4 or 5 game weeks. For example, last season, I don't know when it was, but I had Mahrez and they blanked 6 or 7 game weeks in a row. So I took him out, and the following week he scored an hat-trick.
Oh God, I remember that. Was that against Burnley?
Yeah.
I think that was against Burnley in like November or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, absolute nightmare. Really good advice there, especially on Bruno. Yeah, I think just obviously we'll go away after this and have a bit of a think, but that tackle bonus for Bruno probably does put him ahead of Salah in my reckoning at the moment. Luke, what about you?
Yeah, so I did have a block defence for my second team. I only ever play with 2 teams because it's just 5 is too many. But my second team did have a block defence and very targeted on these opening fixtures, and I'll give you 2 reasons. So Man United, right? So I think they are a better team this season than they were last season. Number 1, I think the signings are good. So I think they're going to probably kick on, and I think defensively they'll be better because they're going to be more offensive. Like Sancho actually really helps that defense because he takes the ball 50 yards further forward and people are worried, so they back off. But the other reason I was considering a Man United block is price-wise, they're pretty good. They're all about 4 million, 4 to 4.5, right? And the good thing with that is if they start really well, so I'm looking at the fixtures, like maybe Leeds score, but Southampton, Wolves, Newcastle, West Ham, Villa, Everton, you probably fancy 3-4 clean sheets in that.
Yeah.
If they get that, the beauty is you can then see the form players, and because you're either going to be dropping to 1.5 million to a really good budget enabling defender, or you're only going to have to find 1 million to go up to a higher one, and you've got all these midfielders in that 4.5. So Grealish at Foden at 4.6, Grealish at 5 million. Even Ward-Prowse, if Ward-Prowse suddenly get racking up the tackles, and Tielemans and stuff, you've got all of these options around that price that you could, as Owen said, you could get you could be lucky and you could get 6 clean sheets in the first 8 games, and then you hop on to all of these other form players that are excellent value. And with 3 transfers, you've got all those points in the bank and you've not really had to rip your team up. Whereas if you go block, let's say, Brighton, like you are ripping up your team to get to players that are better. And so I think the one I think if I'm going to go block, my advice would be Man United probably. The only other one, I think I understand Villa and I understand Brighton because on paper the first 3 or 4 games are all pretty good for those teams. But you've got to remember this is a season-long game with 40 transfers, and if you stick with our aim of 10 to 12 transfers by Christmas, and I know none of us ever get there. I mean, I almost did it, got 14 this year, so I'm pretty proud of that one. But you're going to be ripping up your team at some point because if they start with a good run, they're going to have a bad run, and you don't want 4 Brighton or 5 Brighton players for that bad run because they're all going to come in one go. So whereas Man United, you're less worried about fixtures, and good fixtures are great, and you've got that hop on, hop off. So I that block Man United defence is probably where I'd go because of the way the players have been priced. That's the one I'd consider.
I'm pretty sure Man United as well. So they've got this really good first 8. But I'm pretty sure, haven't they got an incredible run between game week 15 and 28 as well? So you could potentially just hop off a couple of them for a couple of weeks, or 5 or 6 game weeks, and then hop back on for that massive run, and you could be laughing. So outside of blocks and outside of Man United, Luke, which other players interest you? Which ones you think provide really good value?
4 players, right? Number 1 player is White, 2.9 million. He's straight in, right? Yeah, I mean, there's a risk. I want to reserve the right if he's not playing the last couple of pre-seasons, then he'll be probably out. Yeah. But I don't think they've signed him to sit on the bench. He's better than players like Chambers, in my opinion. So, 2.9 million. I mean, I know they haven't got the easiest start, but set and forget 2.9 million Arsenal defender. I mean, those who stuck with Tierney, I don't think many of us did, but 3.2 last year was great value for him. He's cheaper, so could get a goal as well. So White is my number 1 pick that we haven't spoken about. Jimenez, I know I mentioned him earlier, but he is gold dust, that player. 5.3 is underpriced. He was 6 million last year or 6.2 million last year. He had a horror show injury. It's not like he lost form or anything. He's going to come back. He's going to be as good as he was before. He's their main man. Going to play every minute. He's going to have all the penalties. So Jimenez at that price, he's so underpriced. And then the other 2, it's with Grealish going to City. I don't know if that's gone through. I haven't seen the papers today, but I know. It has. Yeah, it has gone through. Now, so Grealish and Foden. I mean, Foden last year, I know you love him and I get frustrated by him, Andrew, but this season should be Foden's break, proper. He is first choice. I can't see Sterling. I think Foden's ahead of Sterling in Pep's eyes, and rightly so in mine. I think Foden's end product is just not good enough. Sterling's end product isn't good enough. So I think if he's playing Foden and Grealish, I mean, both of them at 5 million and 4.6 million are just ridiculous price. But it's pet roulette. So you don't know if they're going to play every game, and that's where the problem is. But if I'm not going to start with either of those two, but those two, I'm keeping a firm eye on them. If they look like they're regulars for that first sort of run of 10 games where he's not rotating, I mean, they're both coming in at that price. It's a ridiculous price. And again, you could pretty easily start with Ward-Prowse and Tielemans and swap them both to Grealish and Foden without, you sell one Man United defender and you're there with 3 transfers. Happy days. And
what about formation? Are you definitely on the 5-4-1, 5-3-2?
4 or 5 at the moment. So it's either 4-5-1 or 5-4-1.
Okay.
And there may be the odd occasion where the random team with all the value I've just done. Basically, I've got Salah as a placeholder who could be Kane, could be Salah. In fact, it could be any player in the game. And that Salah position will be the one where I'm going to aim to use my transfers on that player to get 2-for-1s on premium strikers. So if I can get a 2-for-1 on Kane for Salah and Salah's playing, I don't know, Chelsea or something, then great, happy days. But two good fixtures for one bad fixture and then hop back. And I'm going to try, I think I'm going to try something different in that second team and do that. So, yeah.
I know I touched on it earlier as well, but I don't think we should underestimate this new formation of having 5-3-2 and 5-4-1, because last year, once you locked yourself into 5-4-1, you couldn't get back to a striker because we didn't have 5-3-2. So you always had to work your way back. You had to use 2 transfers basically to get from 5-4-1 to get a striker back in your team. But now that 5-3-2 is unlocked, I think I believe it means you can go all the way from 3-4-3 and 3-5-2 to 5-3-2 or 5-4-1 in a couple of moves, which is massive for the game. I think that it's kind of a transition formation they have stuck in there now that allows you to flow. So you can go from 5 at the back, you can add a striker, you can add a midfielder, and vice versa. You can go from 3 up front to 5 at the back really, really quickly. So I do think that's just worth pointing out. I think it changes the game a little bit. It is. I completely agree.
Listened because we talked about it, didn't we? Quite a lot.
We gave them our WhatsApp group, our Fantasy Football Hub WhatsApp group, gave them some feedback as well. And I'd like to think that they,
we never hold back. Yeah.
Never hold back. This is. Let's do this. Carl, how about you? What's your initial thoughts on how you're going to approach the season?
Well, first of all, I was going to make a bit of a flip point. Going back to the tackles that you mentioned about playing good teams, you may get more tackles. Except maybe if you play Man City, because they never let you get anywhere near the ball.
That's fair. That's a fair point. That is a fair point.
Secondly, on that point, I do agree with it. But one thing that still struck me, I'm pretty sure, like we talked about Ward-Prowse, and is it Rodriguez of Everton, I think, had quite a few tackles, who you'd never expect.
Yeah.
And I think if they're pinned back, I can't imagine him running back and tackling. No. So I think he probably gets his tackles by just nipping in and tackling a defender. I couldn't imagine him backtracking, but I could be completely wrong. As for the fixture ticker, this is very interesting. So we sort of talked about this in previous seasons. And I've normally taken the view, I don't care about fixtures. I just use as less transfers as possible and attack the back end of the season, come FA Cup time, 2-for-1s, 3-for-1s, 4-for-1s, whatever. I think this season is going to be a lot different for me because, and I think Luca alluded to it a little bit, is because of the uncertainty with who's going to be playing in the first few weeks.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more this year than has been in previous years. One, because of the Euros, and secondly, because they've moved the transfer window to end of August instead of before the season starts. So you're having people like Harry Kane, have Lukaku, who's probably going to be, maybe coming, and a few other transfers that are going on. So
Messi.
Well,
that'll be an interesting one.
I've already seen him wearing the Crystal Palace shirt, or it looked like it. Anyway, so my thoughts is that I will be looking. Sorry, it just came up. So my thoughts is to pick a team as like placeholders. So when you see my team later, I've got Kane in my team. Well, that's going to go because of what's happening. So I'll be looking for quite a few players for the first 4 weeks, and then taking a view on certain other players like Kane. Has he moved? But I will be going for that structure that I sort of talked about, and you see it in my team later. But I will make a few tweaks. So I'll be looking at, I think it's Man United's near the top of the ticker. I think Liverpool are close to the top. I'm not quite sure. Maybe I've looked at the first 4 games.
Yeah, for the first, I think the first 4 or 6 Liverpool were really high, but they do play Man City in game week 7, which is why they've bumped down a little.
So if it looks like, say, Kane's going, so I think Chelsea have got difficult fixtures for quite some time. But for someone like Kane, if he is going to go, say, to Man City, I may wish to get on him quite quick.
Yeah.
But there's no point putting him in at the start.
So Fergie made a really good point last year. It pains me to say that. Right?
Wow.
I think you misremembered.
No, I didn't. Genuinely, I didn't, because I copied what he did. And I'm 3 or 4 games in, I was really glad I did. So if you think back to last season, Man United and Man City, I think, that missed the first game, didn't it? So they didn't play that first game week. And your point at the time was, what's the point in wasting a transfer to bring in a player that I know I'm going to want down the line? So I am seriously considering, I know Kane isn't going to start that first game because there's no way, like with all the Spurs stuff, he's either going to play and his head's not right, or he's going to have moved to City, and there's no way Levy lets him play against Spurs if he's coming straight home, because that's a guaranteed hat-trick, isn't it? So you don't want that happening, because that's Levy shotgun to the head territory. But regardless, if Kane's a player that you want, like missing 1 game, which is either against Spurs away or against Man City, either way, that's not a great fixture for him. Is it worth wasting a transfer to bring him in down the line? So I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but I'm just saying that point from last year, I know 3 or 4 games in, I was suddenly thinking, Christ, I'm glad I listened to Fergie for once on this, because I was glad I didn't use those transfers, and it really helped later on in the season.
I think that's a very good point. Though I do think that people like Kane, you could say it's 1 week. Like last time, they missed the whole weekend because it's Man United, Man City, and you knew there was going to be the next week. When we start talking about transfers, that could drag on. So you go, oh, it's only 1 game, then it's 2 games, then it's end of August, deadline day, then he moves in the first week of September, and then it's like, oh, he's got to integrate within the new team. So it's like, you could miss 4 games with most expensive player. And it's not only him, that there'll be like, I'll be keeping my eye on Conor Gallagher, because I don't even know if he's going to be playing as a regular. So he misses the first week because they're playing Chelsea. Is he going to be nailed in, or is he going to be, a sub? I don't know. So there's going to, I may be targeting certain players at the beginning who I'm more than happy. So I could have Salah for the first few weeks, and then sort of say, oh, he could move on later on to either Kane or Lukaku if I feel fit. I will be looking a lot more at who's playing over the weekend, transfer news and all that sort of stuff. But I will be looking at, if I do go down this route of thinking, oh, I may wish to move to Kane, I'm uncertain at this moment in time, then I'll look at the short-term fixtures, knowing that I'll be shifting. And
there's a very valid point, and the beauty of it, just to reiterate to those who are less sure, one of the beauties of the Telegraph, and I just correct me if I'm wrong if this rule has changed, but I don't think it has, but you can transfer in game day.
Yeah.
So on Saturday the 21st, Salah plays Burnley at home, and then Man City play at 3:00 against Norwich. And so you'll have seen the team sheet. So if Kane has gone through and he's starting and you've got Salah, well, then you've basically got a 2-for-1, haven't you? Because you get Man City against Arsenal And you could then switch back to Salah if you wanted for the 5 o'clock or 5:30 game against Chelsea later on that's following Saturday. But I don't think you would want to once you got Kane in. But so I mean I can actually see the argument that could be a mega transfer.
Yeah.
Salah and Burnley to Kane against Norwich. You could be talking about 6 goals for one transfer there, couldn't you? But
and also about Kane. Man City play Norwich game week 2, but also in game week 3, Tottenham play Watford. So wherever Kane is, Man City or Tottenham, and is on the team sheet for either of the 2 matches, you will definitely want him.
I think I would argue about I think I would argue that personally, because how I personally see it playing out, right? So he hasn't turned up for training, which is, a massively disrespectful thing to do, right? And how I see it playing out, if Kane goes to City, it's going to be on deadline day, I would guess, because Levy is going to hold out for every single penny which he can get. And in that period, I appreciate your point about Spurs fixtures. I completely agree with you, but I can't see a cat and L's chance of Kane getting on the pitch in that period, especially since at the moment I don't think he's in the country at the moment. I'd be amazed. So I think I'm personally going to hold off Kane. However, if he does play against Watford for Spurs or plays against Norwich for Man City, I'll definitely be bringing him in. And how I'm kind of playing it is I'm leaving enough funds, or I'm leaving enough funds and somewhere to be able to move off a multitude of players to just move on to him quickly. So at the moment in my draft, I've got about 3 million left or something, but maybe a bit less, maybe like 2.4 or something. But I think I've got enough money to go, for example, straight from Antonio to Kane, or straight from, whoever it is to Kane, because he's just that important in this game, isn't he? But yeah, you're right. You are right to say that whoever he plays for, his fixtures are really, really good.
I'm looking forward to seeing your team if you've got 3 minutes
know.
back. Oh God, this is an opportunity to slate it, isn't it? What goes wrong this year? I've got most of it wrong last year.
I've got a question, and it's probably one which everyone wants to know the answer to, including myself, right? So the number of premiums to have this year, because if you think of the must-have players, right? So I don't think that De Bruyne is a say a must-have. You know what I mean? I don't think De Bruyne is a key player in Telegraph anymore. But now that they have taken away the second assist rule, right? Whereas to me, Bruno, Salah, and Kane, and maybe Trent to a lot of, obviously not last year, but those first 3 to me are probably key. And I don't think you want to be wasting transfers, hopping on and off them, right? You ideally just want them in all season, right? But to get those 3 players in, you have to make serious sacrifices. Everywhere else in your team is really expensive. Can I just ask a question? In your draft at the moment, how many premium players, I'm talking like 6.5, 6.6 million or above, have you got in your teams? I've got 2, but I've got the budget for a third. So I'm going to say 3, because if Kane was starting, I'd go with him. Luke, how many have you got?
In my main team, I've got 3.
You have got the 3, yeah. That was interesting.
I've got 3. Like I said, I've got Kane and Salah in there as placeholders.
Yeah.
But just a very quick point on KDB. Having played Sky so often, the amount of times KDB gets the full house, so KDB can get tackles as well. So yes, he's lost that
Not a
KC,
bad shout. Not a bad
whereas and if Kane goes there, how many assists is KDB going to get? But I don't have a single Man City in either of my teams at the moment. I haven't got a single Man City player at the moment.
And Owen, how many of those premiums have you got in your draft at the moment?
I believe I have got Fernandes and Salah.
Okay, so are you going to plan to rotate Salah and Fernandes with Kane, or are you planning on getting in all three once Kane's fit and firing?
Probably depends on what happens to Kane.
Okay.
If Kane goes to Man City, I actually quite like Son for Tottenham.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
Because Kane and Son work well together, but I'm thinking Son has enough talent to score goals whoever is playing with. And I think I'm not sure how much Son is, but I think going to points per million, Son could potentially be a shock of the season.
Wow. Okay, that's a big call there, Owen. We'll have you on at the end of season. I ridicule you if you're wrong, mind. You know that, don't you?
Trust me, he will, Owen.
We will. We're not messing around. Carl, what are your thoughts?
Well, in my team, I can't remember who was all your premiums, but I think your list included TAA, and I've got Kane, who I will be taking out as rotating with either Bruno or Salah as a stopgap. Okay. So just the two.
So you're planning a rotation strategy then. So you're not planning on having loads of transfers left at Christmas.
No, I'm not planning no rotation strategy. I'm planning. My defence is assuming they all play, will stay in place. I don't have many plans to have. If Kane wasn't playing this transfer issue, he would probably be in there, and I wouldn't do any rotation. I just wouldn't go have any Bruno or any Salah. Maybe have Bruno, but probably not. I'll just have my 5 big hitter defenders, and I'll have my battering ram of Kane up front, and I'll have his little minions around him.
His minions.
Picking up his their points per million.
You're going to have Kane supported by Yves Bissouma, Conor Gallagher, and Ariel Romeo. Okay.
You see my team already.
Okay, just to touch on my initial thoughts, even though this is why I love doing these. I love podcast week, pre-season podcast week, because it just you have like all these ideas swimming in your head, and what this podcast does in every format is helps me refine it down and and find the value players, which I've done. But I was pretty set on either 5-3-2 or 5-4-1. Or I think my current draft is a 4-4-2, just because I think Antonio is really, really good value. Just a couple of players. I won't touch on the keepers. I think I'll either be going. Well, as I say that, I've learned about Sanchez. I wasn't probably as up on Sanchez as you guys. So Martinez, Meslier, or Sanchez. The budget may actually dictate that, because that's 0.9 million in it between Martinez and Sanchez, which is a hefty bit of change. Trent and Robertson probably go without saying. I'm not sure on the double up. I think the double up is very expensive. They're two of the the most expensive defenders in the game. I think Trent is like 5.5. Luke's like that. I got the double up. Trent is 5.4. I think Robertson's 5.1. Ones who I've picked out as potential interesting ones. So Rudiger, I've already said at 3.8. I'm saying Rudiger like he's like the nailed on my team. I don't even think he's in my draft at the moment, but Rudiger is definitely what I'm looking at. Luca Dean I quite like at 3.9. Everton's opening fixtures are really, really good. And obviously with Rodriguez and Sigurdsson likely not available for the start of the season, he could be on maybe all corners and free kicks, maybe even on penalties. Even though I think Richarlison tends to take them. Creswell I've already mentioned. Soufal at 3.2. I think he looks at a fantastic price. He scored 120 odd points last season, so I'm quite surprised only 3.2. And Matty Target has only gone up from 2.6 to 3.1. And I know that he hasn't had much of a pre-season. I think Ashley Young has actually been playing a lot of left back, so I'll probably leave him to start off with. But he's definitely one I've got my eye on. Matty Cash on the other side is 3.2 as well, who could be good. A couple of other defenders I like. I think Luke Ayling at 3.3. I think he was very unlucky last season he didn't get any attacking returns, but how he didn't I don't know, because he did everything but. Couple of other sneaky ones. So on the other side of that, Leeds defence, and this guy is currently in my team only because of his price at the moment, but Junior Firpo, I don't know if you guys know much about him, but he's 2.8 million and he's signed for Leeds. He's going to be their left back. Seen him in pre-season, flying down the left-hand side. I think 2.8 million for an attacking Leeds defender could be reasonable value. So he's in it at the moment, but only because of his price tag. And I'm going to monitor this one, but I mentioned him earlier. Obviously, we were talking about midfielders, right? So I got it all wrong. But Ryan Bertrand is signed for Leicester, and he played last night, and he had 2 assists, and apparently he was on all set pieces ahead of Maddison as well. Now the thing with Leicester, they've got loads of fullbacks, right? They've got 5 very, very good fullbacks. So how much he plays, I'm not sure. But at 3.3 million, Leicester defender on set pieces, if he carries on, all I'm saying is it's one to monitor. I wouldn't put him in a game at one team. It's one to look at. I think Reece James also at 3.9. The problem with him last season was he got rotated an awful lot. He tended to come on as a sub in an awful lot of games, and I got Stones at 4. As we mentioned earlier. So they're my defenders I'm looking at. I've got shorter lists of mids and forwards. It's all right, don't worry, guys. But I had Bissouma, Romeo. I didn't see Romeo anywhere in your list, Carl. But I'm pretty sure that it may be because his season was curtailed. He got injured around Christmas and never really recovered. But I would have guessed that he would have done really well in the tackles, and he's only 2.8 million as well. So he's currently in my draft as well. Ward-Prowse I've mentioned. Someone we haven't mentioned so far is Buendia at Aston Villa, who also likes to tackle. So I was looking at some of his stats. He likes a card as well, but he does like a tackle and he shoots a lot. And he's joining a very, very aggressive-looking Aston Villa attack. 3.8 million. I think Buendia could get attacking returns, but I think he'd also get some tackle bonus if he can just avoid all those yellow cards. Rafinha I mentioned earlier at 3.9. I think I'm just shocked at how cheap he is, consider what a prospect. It may be because he missed the first quarter of last season, why his points don't quite marry up to his price. And Ndidi at 3.5, you mentioned him earlier, Carl. For tackle bonus, he is the king. He is the man. So if you're just looking for someone to tick along in the middle of the park and pick that up, he could be quite good. Kai Havertz at 5 million. I've got a bit of a sweet spot for Havertz, but then this was before Lukaku was rumoured to sign. I think if Havertz is playing up front for Chelsea, which he was at the back end of last season, I think a 5 million midfielder playing up front for Chelsea could be incredible value. But with Lukaku, that probably dampens his appeal. And apart from the obvious, I've just got a couple of strikers. So I've mentioned Antonio, 4.8. I take your point, Luke. I do think, he could be a transfer waiting to happen, right? 4.8 million is crazy. If you think how much he is in all the other games, he's as much as the guys who are 5.3 and 6 million, right? So
yeah, I if you've got him, and I think the point you made earlier, if you've got him as a placeholder for Kane,
exactly,
the injury doesn't matter
exactly.
because you've just got your easy switch when it does happen. But yeah, the other formats, I have got Antonio in FPL and Sky, but I always wildcard game week 3, and there's the overhaul between 3 and 4. Yeah. So he's going after that for an informed player, whereas you haven't got that in Telegraph, which is why he's not there. Because I do really rate him when he plays, but his injury record is just, yeah, for me, it's just I just in Telegraph you just can't go near injury-ridden players, and I just think that's what he represents to me.
Oh, that's fair.
This will be the one. He'll play the season. He'll be the top scorer now. 35 goals and outscore game.
He'll do the Meslier thing, won't he?
Yeah.
A couple of other cheap forwards I noticed. Iheanacho is inexplicably priced at 4.7 again. The only thing with him, is they've signed, obviously Harvey Barnes is back, and Iheanacho only started playing after Barnes got injured, and they've also signed that Daka as well, so not quite sure, but I just cannot see how we can drop him. The form he was in the end of last season, he was absolutely sensational. He was, he's the most formed player in the league. So 4.7 million again. I just think, my good, you can have Antonio and Iheanacho, two top class Premier League strikers.
I think you should definitely start with both of them, given you're in all my leagues. So yes, please just start with those two.
Jota is 4.7. I wouldn't say to start with Jota. However, if Firmino, Mane or
play
Salah,
3 up front, get him in as well.
No, I'm not getting him in as well. But if Firmino, Mane or Salah get injured, Jota is banging my team at 4.7. So he's a placeholder.
Isn't Firmino still at the top of America?
No, he played this afternoon. Actually, he's played his first friendly back for Liverpool. So I think that Jota may start the first game, but and this is the same for all fantasy games, especially in the Telegraph. In game week 2 or game week 3, I don't want to be plotting transfers 2 or 3 game weeks in, and there's nothing worse, as we all know, waiting for a team sheet, wondering if your player is going to play, and that's what you'll have with players like Jota. And the only other player, we haven't mentioned him yet, and I've been quite surprised. He is in my team. He's a forward, a cheap forward. Can anyone guess who he is? We haven't mentioned him at all yet. And I'm quite surprised because he's popular in FPL and Sky.
Is it Ings?
No, he's 5.9. He's quite expensive, Ings. But
Watkins or not?
No, he's in the 10th place. Nope.
Tony.
Ivan Toney. So he's
new player to the league. I don't get it.
I know. Owen said at the start, he's 4.2 million, Luke. 4.2 million on penalties.
Rudiger's 3.8 million.
Rudiger as well.
No, but my point is,
I get your point.
If okay, fine. If Tony is your number one striker, but if he's not, there's 20 players in midfield or defence who are cheaper and are proven to get Ward-Prowse 4.3. You're going to get 170 points. Is Tony going to get 170 points? I just don't get new players. Again, I'm going to be proved so wrong. Everybody's got him.
No, it's fine. I just don't get the attraction. Watkins last year was laughed at for being new to the Premier League. Bamford was scoffed at for being new to the Premier League.
By me, wasn't I? Bamford loads of the season. Watkins, first half of the season, second half a lot better. So I'll give you that. But he took a while to warm up.
He did.
It's not worth the risk of a new player. In Telegraph, it's a transfer. Bring him in. He's smashing it after 2 games. Bring him in. But sorry.
It's all right.
No,
Carl, sorry, you had something there, Carl.
I was similar point to Luke. You only have to go back to the tables that we looked at before and the points per million or points per million per game. How low forwards is compared to both midfielders and defenders.
Yeah.
So I would stick to the minimum, which is
fair point. Well,
I'd have none if you'd allow it.
I'd have none.
No, Fergie,
But I'd have 5.
don't listen to us. Get 3 strikers in, right? Definitely.
I'm definitely on Antonio 4.8, and I'm tempted
3
by
injury-prone
Iheanacho.
strikers is the way to go. That's what I've heard.
What, for the wooden spoon?
Yeah, for the wooden spoon. Okay, just before we move on to questions, I just wanted to have a quick look at, if I can get it up, at the current ownership, because this is for all the players we've just talked about. Let's have a look how that translates into the current ownership of the game. So top of the shop, Mohamed Salah is owned by 41% of the game. So 41% of all players disagree with you guys, and they think that Salah is the man. Kane, surprisingly, is owned by 35.5%, and Bruno 29.8%. So those three absolutely dominated the ownership there, as we expected. I was surprised that Ben White at 2.9 million is owned by nearly 29% of managers, because I don't get the Ben White thing. I know, Luke, you're sweet on him, but he plays centrally, so I think your comparison with Tierney probably isn't a fair one, because Tierney flies up, he flies at the wing. He got a goal and gets assist, whereas White isn't, personally. And Arsenal, I know they improved at the back end of the season, but I still I don't get it personally. Luke Shaw 4.2 million, owned by 22.2%. And then Ivan Toney 4.2 million, owned by 20.5%. Martinez is owned by 3.8%. So they've all jumped on the Martinez train. He's owned by 20% of the game. Bamford 19%, Grealish 19%, Trent, Foden, Saka, De Bruyne, Watkins, Son, Target, and Calvert-Lewin. So really interesting ones there, and none of those bonus magnets that we mentioned, Carl, apart from Martinez. Is there any, Owen, is there anyone in that list which kind of surprises you in terms of the ownership? I'm shocked by Ben White, personally.
Yeah, I was shocked by Ben White, but also I'm shocked how many people are jumping on new players.
Like me, you mean?
Like Sancho.
Yeah.
I think is 20% owned or something like that. And they might not even start the first couple of game weeks. So I can't believe how many people are like not playing it safe.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair enough. Luke, does anyone on that list shock you there in terms of the ownership so far?
I'm quite worried by how template my team is. I deliberately don't look at ownership stats at the start because I don't want to be influenced. But yeah,
there you are, mate. We just influenced you.
Well, no, I mean, I have actually got the top 5 players on that list, which is I'm like, oh god. So
brilliant.
Yeah.
When you was reading your team, part of your team earlier, I thought you was reading my team out.
Ah, yeah, that's right.
Sounded so similar.
Well, there we are. We'll have a look at our drafts after the questions, and it'd be interesting to see. And I know when Luke mentioned the Man United block defence, I could see Owen's ears prick up, because I've seen Owen's draft and he fancies that. Carl, anyone on there for you? Anything of interest?
Not of interest, but none of the names surprised me. They're all the obvious names. If you ask people about football teams or players, they'd be the names to come off your head. I'm surprised that none of the, I don't know, any of my players have got in there.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if that says something about me or something about someone else. But yeah, I'm not surprised about Ben White either being actually so popular owned. But yeah, all the obvious picks.
Okay. Okay, so let's move on to some questions, and we've got a lot. We've got some on screen, I've got some on email, I've got some on WhatsApp, I've got all sorts of questions. So let's have a run through. So first one off Borg Johnson, who says tips for people who'll be playing it for the first time. Well, I can answer this one. Firstly, listen to this podcast end to end, and also you can't go wrong on fantasyfootballhub.co.uk. We've got how to play Telegraph, and we've also got how to win at Telegraph. You cannot go wrong there. So we can go on from that one. We may have answered a lot of these actually, and just have a look through. So Dan W says best goalkeeper options with the new bonus point system. So I think we've all agreed Sanchez, Martinez and Meslier, and I think Owen said Pope as well in there. Daniel Moody, 3 premium players feels like 1 too many, but 2 feels like 1 too few. Discuss. I think we've discussed that exact point, haven't we? That between that 2 and 3, and to Owen's point, I think you're absolutely right. I think it all depends on what happens with Kane, doesn't it? Absolutely. Peter Marshall says, intrigued by Owen's approach of defensive blocks, double and triple. What do you see as the main pros and cons? Obviously, the main pro is smashing it. Owen, out of your 5 teams, how many of them are blocks? And what are the cons?
In all 5 teams, I've got a defender, 2 defenders from the same team in everyone.
Okay.
And the reason I did that is if one of them concedes, I got more of the teams to rely on. So instead of mixing them and having just one team, if a club went on a run of 5-6 clean sheets, I would like to have that club because I've included pretty much all the top sides in my defensive block, and it goes back to the point I'm making about what your target is for a season. Like, if a club don't concede for a long period of time, there's bound to be players what have a block of players from that club, and immediately you can find yourself a long way behind them.
Yeah.
And have the same number of transfers as you.
Yeah. Tips from the champ there, everybody, on how to manage defensive blocks. Fantastic, Owen. Thank you very much for that. Question from who's got the kit. He said he's most excited. So you always say set the team up for several game weeks and limit transfers, but this season there's so much uncertainty about who starts or what team they are even playing for. How to manage this in TFF? Luke, can I ask you this one first?
Set your team and limit transfers.
Set your team and limit transfers.
I mean, there's a few on, I think so. It's sort of the first one, tips people who play for the first time, right? Really, by Christmas, so I'm going to answer 2 questions here, hopefully. But for New Year, so between now and January the 1st, 12 transfers should be the max that you use, in my opinion. And I would argue that no more than 3 or 4 should be luxury transfers. So, for example, bringing Kane in after, if you don't start with him, that is a luxury transfer. And it's probably essential to do it. But I still see that as a luxury transfer because you're losing a good player to bring another good player in. Yeah. So for me, it's pick a team, ignore the fixtures, think of the first, whatever it is, 14, 15 fixtures as a block, right? And go from that. So people like Rafinha, who I would not touch like in FPL and things like that, because their fixtures are so bad. But for this game, he's brilliant because he's cheap, he's going to do pretty well, he's nailed, all of that. So yeah, for me, it's pick a core of 8 players that you think, I am not moving these players, and then have 3 or 4 players that you think, fine. And then if you've got Antonio, when he inevitably gets injured, then you can swap him out for someone and all of that. But yeah, so for me, it's pick at least 8 players that you think are just going to be there for the next 14 games. Don't pick for the first 6 games or the first 8 games would be my advice on that.
And also, to add to your point, if like Salah or Fernandez blanks the first 3 in a row, don't panic, just leave them in.
Yes, completely. I 100% agree with the Owen, and I suppose I would just add on as well, in terms of how you manage this in TFF as well. So it's always good to try and get the highest priced player in each position if you can, because it means you can just switch off and on really easily. And as well, in terms of managing with the uncertainty, so if we're talking about Kane specifically, so I'm kind of mitigating that risk by making sure I've got enough money in the bank for Kane, right? But if you really want Lukaku, if he's about to join, or if Messi joins Crystal Palace or something like that, Carl, or whatever it is, the maximum in the game is 7 million. So you can kind of plan ahead and just leave yourself flexibility in these certain sort of positions. So I would do, and we've answered the second question about, does the tackling points for mids really make much difference? It does, and we've also highlighted a few of the players there who would benefit, which are on some earlier slides if you want to have a bit more of a detailed look. Mark Cram asks, thoughts in Leeds defenders in the TFF format, relatively cheap and some attacking potential. So I touched on them earlier. I touched on Ayling and Firpo. Carl, I don't know if you've had a look at all about any Leeds defenders. Have you got any strong thoughts either way?
No. Short answer is my understanding off the top of my head. I haven't looked into Leeds itself. I think they have quite a difficult start to the season. Yeah. I know they were at Man United. The 2 that I would think about are the ones that you mentioned before. Mentioned then Ayling and Firpo. Only I don't know anything about him except I think he comes from Barcelona. He's meant to be really good. I would keep an eye out and then think about bringing them in the future. Last year, it's a very strange season for Leeds in the sense that they, if I recall correctly, they conceded a lot at the beginning of the season, and then they started having a lot of clean sheets near the end of the season. Yeah. Now, how are they going to start off this season? Is it going to be like the start of last year or like how they finished? So I would tend to steer clear for me. But if you are going to say, yes, I'm going to take the plunge, I'd go for the 2 fullbacks because they seem quite attacking.
Okay. It's probably worth noting that I think they have had quite a few defensive injuries as well. I did see a stat yesterday that I'm sure I saw. It was one of the FPL pods that Leeds had the worst expected goals conceded away from home or something, but they definitely improved at the end of the season. So I've got Firpo at the moment. I personally think there's probably more proven options at that at that price point. Maybe someone like Soufal, Target. You can go up 0.4, 0.5 to Rudiger, and Creswell and players like that would be my personal thing. But there's nothing wrong with going for Leeds players you fancy them. I think the next question is an FPL question. We'll skip that. Luke, I'm going to ask you this one because you've got it. But is a Trent and Robbo double up for TFF worth the investment in funds? Big nods from Luke.
Yeah, I think so. If you look at the way they ended last season,
yeah.
So, right, Trent, if you look over the whole season, terrible, right, for value for money for that investment. Not terrible, but pretty bad. But if you look at the last 8 games, he was absolutely on fire. Now, in addition, I know he got injured, but he is still going to have that, hey, was I actually selected for England or would I have been dropped?
Yeah.
So he has to come out flying with how well the England team played in the Euros, because they're all arrogant. You can't be a Premier League player and not have a level of, self-confidence, and which means you've got a level of arrogance. He will not like thinking, I'm 5th choice right back for England, but I won the European Cup and the league in the last 2 seasons. He's going to hate that. So he's got to come out flying. And then Robbo he always starts the season well. To be honest, I always think pick Robbo at the start of the season if you're picking one of them, because he's generally a bit cheaper and he generally starts the season slightly better. And then Trent kicks in about 4 weeks in. But they're wingers. So they are attacking midfielders in a top 3 team who underperformed but finished the season strong. So, yeah, 5.4 million, really comparing them against, the people in that ilk. So, would I rather have them than someone like Son at 6.6? Yes, I would. So, yeah, they're in. And they're proven again, aren't they? So Sancho at 5.7, or you've got a straight swap if you need it as well, sort of there with pretty easy moves. So Sancho's flying. You can hop off them onto someone who's fairly premium as well. So is it worth it? I don't know, but I've got it in my main team because I think Liverpool's start is the first 5 or 6 games are so good, and then you can easily just lose one. And I think you're going to want, when VVD comes back, Liverpool's clean sheets will come back, and you're going to want at least one, even with the tougher fixtures.
And to add to that point, Liverpool's central defensive defenders, you don't really know who they are going to be. So Robertson and Trent are the only 2 standout Liverpool defenders. So
yep, I think that's a good point as well. The next 2 questions we've kind of answered, but I'll just expand on them. So Mark Cram asks, is it worth getting Kane now to avoid a guaranteed transfer in a few weeks, or start without and see how it goes? I think Carl's point you mentioned earlier, Carl, is very good in terms of saying, well, how long do you wait, right? Because in that time where Kane does eventually maybe sign and start for Man City, other players such as, we mentioned, I've mentioned Antonio and some other players could have scored 3-4 goals in that time, right? So if you think of the value of a transfer, so I think it's kind of widely acknowledged that the value of a transfer is roughly 10 to 15 points. I would personally, and I think with Carl on this, I would hold off Kane. But if you think you're going to want him, which I do, I would definitely have it in the back of your mind how to get him in. I wouldn't be one to make 2 or 3 transfers to get him in, if that makes sense. And Lewis Stevenson extends on it. Is it worth trying to fit Trent, Salah, Bruno and Kane to one team and leave a little budget for the rest of the team? Or is it best going without one to enable more budget in defence where there's more value? Really good question. We talked about this. And Carl, in your team, so I think it sounds like Owen, Luke and I are kind of going with the premiums. You said you're not, but kind of how are you gonna hop around, or are you just not gonna hop around? Are you just not gonna have Salah, or what's your plan?
I don't plan on having Salah or Bruno.
Or Bruno, sorry.
Yeah,
I missed that.
Well, I will do it at the beginning because and if Kane was in, I would have him there, and I wouldn't bother with Bruno or Salah. I think Bruno's better than Salah because of the tackles.
Yeah.
But I really, when we get to his team, I really quite like the shape of my team. And Luke made a good point earlier that once I'm settled, especially if Lukaku comes in, I may rotate the one if I feel like I've got huge amounts of luxury. If I don't, then so be it. Then they won't come in.
Okay, superb. We've got some questions off Simon Baldock, who is a very, very avid TFF player and listener. And he asks, again, we've probably answered most of these, I think. So what formations do you consider the most flexible and offer medium-term value? I think the fact they've added in that 5-5-3-2, anything around 5-3-2, 5-4-1, 4-5-1, you can now hop to basically any formation really, really quickly. So, I think Carl's data, as usual, shows the values at the back. So I think, we're kind of mainly on a 5-3-2 or 5-4-1. So that hopefully that answers that question. We've also answered his second one, which is around Bruno and KDB, etc. Right, this is a long one, so I'll read it out and see where we go. Does defence and a quality goalkeeper hold the greatest value in the game? I think the answer to that is yes. If so, do we have to hold these players across the first half of the season until things settle down and other viable options emerge? Any suggestions, please? Hopefully we've given a lot of suggestions there. What do you think the likely impact on goalkeeper is for save points? We've answered that one. And he shared so many questions in one paragraph. Panel's thoughts about Reece James. Owen, what do you think about Reece James?
If he was nailed, yes, but I don't think he's nailed for a start. And Chelsea do have quite a tough opening fixtures with Liverpool and is it Arsenal in there?
They've got a really tough first 5 or 6 after Palace, haven't they?
First 6, they've got Arsenal, Liverpool, Tottenham, and Man City. So it's not ideal.
Stay away from them. And also, if you're thinking of keeping them all season, I know it's miles away, but in December, Chelsea missed 2 matches because of the Club World Cup.
What a great point.
I know a lot was changed to your team before knowing them, but if you have a Chelsea block, don't forget that's transfers to get your players out, plus it's the same amount of transfers again to get them back in for their double game week.
That's a really,
that's
really
a new record
point
for the longest planned transfer.
That is
Reece James, when you know he's nailed. Plan him for 18 weeks' time.
But I would, I think there, Owen, you've definitely kind of swayed my thing, right? So we know the fixtures are not nice till game week 7. Then between game week 7 and 18, okay, that's 11 weeks, nearly a third of the season. But as we know, transfers in the second half of the season are much, much more important. And it sounds like we're going to want a Chelsea pile-on, right? At some point, they're going to have probably 3-for-1s and 4-to-1s over some other teams in the second half of the season. It's probably best to save your transfers for then. pile on Chelsea when they have these, this real congestion of fixtures, and hopefully you can get, four blocks of clean sheets in 2 weeks or something, which is obviously what happened with City this time around. Brilliant.
The only thing on Reece James, just to add, is he almost always comes on a sub if he's not playing. Yeah. And another niche thing with the TFF is if you play part of the game for long enough, you do get a half clean sheet. So from that perspective, FPL is a nightmare because you're getting 1 point, or you might be getting decent points, so probably steer clear. But for Telegraph, he's probably still going to get you 1 point, even if he comes on. He may get you 3 points or 4 points for the half clean sheet. So there is an argument. I can see it, and he's quite offensive. But if you compare his price to Chilwell on the other side at 5 million, he's 3.9. So he's not really on my radar, but I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if that's what whoever's question it was, if that's what you're thinking. He's probably not the worst one. Maybe we're all sleeping on him.
Yeah, and even if you have only him, right, it's only one transfer out then anyway. So, but a 3.9 million, I think I prefer Rudiger is all, just because you know he's going to play. And final one from Simon, interesting one again. So, what are the likely continuing impacts of the reconfiguration of key contributions have on selection? He says, here I am thinking of players like Sterling and KDB, who seem a bit overpriced. So we haven't mentioned, we touched on KDB earlier. Carl, what, have you got any of those really expensive Man City assets in your mind that we used to just jump on because of all their goal involvement?
No, of course, it's been a couple of years since key contributions disappeared now. When we start talking about Reece James, and he's a fantastic player, but it's about his minutes and when he play, blah blah blah. Same goes for people like Sterling. He can be a fantastic player. Most of the Man City players, fantastic, but how much will they play? And I think the price is too high for what they get in fantasy terms. I think they're fantastic players, but price value, I just stick away. I will probably jump on them some stage in the year because they're running hot and everything else, but not for the time being.
I mean, I've just looked. I mean, I'm shocked at this stat, but there are no Man City players above 18.2% ownership, and that's Foden, who's risky in my opinion. I mean, especially with Grealish going there, there's even more rotation. But there's only 5 over 10% owned. That's madness. For the best, they are the best team in the league, and 2 of them are Diaz and Edison at both about 11.58 and 11.95. So they're only 11.5 to 12% owned. So I think, we could all be sleeping on Man City, but it's the rotation. I think Diaz, Edison, fine, but I mean, I think there's better keepers than Edison.
I agree.
Diaz, you're competing with Trent and Robbo at that price. I mean, he's not going to get the attacking stuff that they get. So I think they're all overpriced until I guess Gundogan last season, whatever it was, 3.6 or 3.8 came flying through. I think, Gundogan's, Foden, Grealish, if any of them look nailed, they're all very well priced, and you'll see their ownership rocket to 40-50% on those players. But yeah, I mean, I'm amazed by that stat that nobody's over 20%.
Plus, if Kane does go to City, that's Kane, Grealish, and there's probably only one space for Foden, Sterling, Mahrez, Jesus. You don't know who's going to play.
Absolutely, and that's always the thing with City. They're such expensive assets. I think the time to play City, which is how we played it last year, which is how all of us ended up with decent ranks. Again, is to just wait to January, wait until they have that pile up of games, which they always have. They always have the third on the FA Cup. They always get through. They always have the fourth round. They seem to get nice fixtures around that time as well. Similar to Chelsea, just jumping on the pile ups. I think is the time to do it in the second half of the season. One question we've had from our Fantasy Football Hub WhatsApp group of Kev Loaf, and this is an interesting question. Is it possible to do well in TFF alongside other fantasy games? Does anyone want to answer that? It's an interesting question.
Yeah, it is interesting. But what I'm doing this season is in TFF, I'm trying to pick still good teams in like FPL, but I'm trying to pick a bit differently. So I either do good in one format
I see.
or another, which at the end of the season, if I do good in one format and win a lot of mini leagues, I'm happy about that. But if you want to win everything, you will either end up winning everything or nothing at all.
Yeah. Really good point.
This is Edward, a good friend of mine. Like he's always don't diversify because good players are still good players. But I do get, so don't get me wrong, Owen, because I used to play like that. But I'm probably more similar. And if I look back to last year, right? So there's games that overlap. So FPL and fan team very, very similar. So if you do one and you have very similar teams in both formats, you'll do quite well. And I think last year or the year before, somebody won both, didn't they? I know there's a lot of
there was
dodginess around some opinions there, but so those are very, very similar. If I look at my Sky and FPL, I find that my planning in Sky really helps my focus in TFF, and then I've got that added bonus of I may get a 3-1, where in Sky it would be a 2-1, for example, because you can transfer from the 12 o'clock to the 5 o'clock game, for example. And so my last FPL was terrible last season, but Sky I was 150th, and TFF I think it was 230th or 240th or something in the end. So both very good ranks, get high up in all my mini leagues on both of those fronts, and that was because I played both games very, very similarly, and I stick to two teams, and I keep my first team in Sky and TFF very similar, and my second team in TFF and Sky very similar, so that I've got that continuity within both, but I'm keeping similar decisions in both teams. It's not always the same, but Salah, if he's a good player, is still a good player in every format.
Yeah. Carl, you play multiple formats. Anything to add there as well?
I think you can. I just depends. Sometimes how the cards fall, because like Luke said, well, I sort of disagree. In like Salah's good in all formats. He may be. It depends on your price, and it depends if you can take a step back and evaluate players based on the rules of the game. Yeah. And there is a lot of crossover, and the people like Luke, who's like really good at all the games, can do stuff like that. So good managers.
No, I'm not really good at all of the games. I'm all right at Sky and TFF.
He plays all the games.
In FPL is decidedly average. And Dream Team is shocking. Terrible game, Andrew. Terrible game, but I'm shocking at Dream Team. Well done, champ, by the way. I know I'm ribbing you, but well done. We'll get it in 2.5 hours in.
I'm surprised that we're allowed to be in your company, but anyway, that's a slightly different podcast or Twitter thread. But yeah, no, top people can. Some people, they will see players in one format and they'll pick them across the whole piece, and they won't distinguish the subtleties between the game. But you can definitely do well in all of them.
Yeah, I've got an article on the Hub called "How to Manage Multiple Fantasy Teams," which may answer a lot, a lot of the questions here. But for me, a couple of the key points is, make sure you understand the rules and intricacies and nuances of each team, right? Because there's certain players in certain games who score well specifically, and as Carl has just alluded to. Obviously, goals, assists, and clean sheets are bread and butter in all games, right? But there are nuances in different games where certain players score particularly well in Sky, for example, but not in FPL. They do in TFF, but not in Sky, etc. So, but generally, you've got like a player pool of like, I don't know, maybe 20 or 25 players with a couple of outliers, like in Sky for your tackle bonus and passing bonus, right? Who you would never have in other ones. But generally speaking, if you research enough and plan enough and you invest enough time in the planning, that's the thing of me is the planning, right? So we did a podcast, didn't we, last January, and we were like, oh my goodness, look at this Man City run, and we managed to get it out early enough because it started the following day their run, didn't we? I mean, he said, right, jump on Man City now. This is the time. And if people, if we hadn't have done that, we would have just had very, very mediocre ranks.
In fairness, I mean, like, in TFF, I think I had 7. I think one of you boys had 8. But that is how you won Dream Team, isn't it? Because you just had a ridiculous amount of Man City players, and then nobody could catch up because the limited transfers. And
if you can plan, I think planning in all fantasy games is absolutely king. And choose your spots where you attack. That's the thing. Yeah. Choose your battles. Know when you're losing, you're up against it, and just play it safe. And know when to attack. It's the same as it's the same across the board. Anyway.
Also, if you're playing different games, it's important to make sure when you switching from game to game to have a different mentality.
Yeah.
For example, with Telegraph, you might just think, oh, I can't have another Man City player because I have too many, and that's where you can go a bit wrong.
Yeah, completely. I mean, we jumped on, right? So we had, what did we have? 7, 8, Man City players. I don't think, we've actually touched on it yet. We're conscious of the time. I don't want to go over too much.
We are going to hit 3, aren't we?
But I would just say, just in terms of strategy, so for any new players, of which, hopefully and welcome, right? But a very common strategy, Luke touched on it earlier. It's very hard to do. This is the game which requires the most discipline. But you need to save your transfers back the second half of the season. And last year we were quizzed about why do you need to, and then people found in the second half why you need to hold your transfers back, because there's so many opportunities in the second half. And when we jumped on that Man City block, so my personal team, I'm not sure about your guys' teams, but I jumped from 5,000th overall rank to 150th overall rank in 3 weeks. That's how big it is. Now you would never get that in any game unless you smashed 11 differentials in, right? But that's how impactful saving these transfers back and jumping on these runs of games which Chelsea are going to have, Man City are going to have, but they're all in the second half of the season. So kind of advice for setting your team up. We'll show our drafts now. It's the final thing before we go, we promise. But you'll probably find quite reasonably rounded teams. May have a few blocks. No, Owen's got some blocks. Because he plans to attack. Attack and try and win the game. The reigning Euros champ. But it's probably worth saying that because I don't think we've mentioned it so far on the podcast. Let's whiz through our drafts, gents, before we all fall asleep. Carl, I've got yours up first. Do you just want to run us through your team as it stands?
Yeah. Okay. So I've basically followed the formation that I've sort of talked about before. I've gone to 5-4-1. I've gone heavy at the back. So start off, I've got Sanchez in goal, who was the best value, and then I've pushed most of my money in defence. So I've got Robertson and TAA from Liverpool, 2 full-backs. And then I've got 2 Man City defenders in Diaz and Stones, and Maguire from Man United to make up the 5th. I put Kane up front as a placeholder, so it's going to change a little bit. But my midfield would be Tielemans, Rafinha, Ward-Prowse, and
Bissouma.
Bissouma.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bissouma. Now, I'm not quite sure. So if that would be my team going forward, I'm not quite sure how much I've got in the bank. Not a lot. But with Kane transfer, I'll probably take him out, put in someone like Salah, and have a holding striker until I've decided to bring Kane in and to sort of see how the land lies.
Yeah.
So I've gone for value in the midfield and cheaper, but they've all picking up. We mentioned them all on the previous slides, so hopefully the names don't come as too much of a surprise of why I chose those ones.
It's a very good supporting cast for Kane there. A lot of creativity feeding Kane.
And to be honest, I'm actually really happy, much happier than I was last year. And I remember when I saw Luke's team last year, I was so envious. I don't know if you remember when he put it up on the screen. I was just in awe of his structure because he had so many premium midfielders in there, and he had cheap defence, which I think was the right thing last year.
Yeah.
And his commentary around it, which was marvelous, was like, okay, they may not play, he may just rotate those, but the core of it looks like they will be playing, and they're stable, and you don't need to do anything. And I think when I look at my team, even those cheap midfielders, I think they're pretty nailed on to play, and I can just sort of sit back and go away for a few months.
I think, Joe or Carl, as much as in awe you were of Luke's team, I am pretty, just thinking about everything we've spoken about this evening, right? I am very much in awe of this team because looking at it, Antonio for me is the only miss. I won't get away from him, right? But other than Antonio, I really, really like that team. No Salah and Bruno is always risky, right? But with this new tackle bonus, I just think it makes a difference. So yeah, fantastic team there, Carl. Next we've got Luke. Luke, do you want to run through your team for us?
Been changing it a lot while we've been talking. So I've got 9 nailed spots in my main team. I'm playing around with the other team. And it is worth noting Carl's midfield of Bissouma, Ward-Prowse, Rafinha and Tielemans I really like. So, Carl, the one thing I might consider is potentially going Diaz to Antonio and Kane to Salah, just so you've got that move of Salah to someone, and then you have a bit in the bank as well. But I do really like that midfield. I've got that midfield in my second team actually. But the people I've got, I think that are nailed. I've got Robbo and TAA at the back. I've got Kufal, who may go, but I really want to keep him. If I could stretch to Cresswell, I would, just because the start is so good. I've got White, because I know you're not hot on him, but I quite like if he's nailed again, we'll see where he is. And then I've got Sanchez in goal. So those 4 at the back and Sanchez are in. I've then got a question mark. I've got Konsa just because he's 3 million, and I think Villa have got a good start, but that 3 mil spot will be a value if somebody appears that's 2 mil early doors that's playing for any team. I'll be moving that and freeing up the cash. And then what that means, I've got Rafinha, who I don't really like Leeds' start, but he's a very attacking player, and I just think if you're getting a player for 18 weeks, he's great value at 3.9. I've got Basuma at 2.8 million. Equally, he could be Billy Gilmore, but I don't know if he's going to start. So again, there's an easy drop to free up a bit of cash for one of those two if I need to do it, or even Konsa down to Gilmore. And then I've got Salah, Bruno, and Kane. So Kane is a placeholder. He can be anybody, but similar to you, I may even go Antonio just to cover you in the mini leagues, Andrew. But but the structure is there. So my intention is, I think Bruno will be there for the season, but I think my intention is to rotate Salah and Kane and then probably Robbo for the season to bring in the form defender, the form striker, and the form midfielder for my transfers, and that's where I'll be doing it. So hopefully White, Kufal, Sanchez, Konsa, Rafinha, and Basuma just play, and they're just set and forget. And then I can use, those 3-4 other slots to the 3 other slots to rotate, and that will be where my transfers go.
My team is so shit compared to yours. I don't want to bring my team up on screen. Let's have a look at Owen's first. Owen, we've got your team on screen. Owen, do you want to talk us through it?
And I had Diana in goal, but obviously throughout this podcast, I made out Martinez.
Yeah.
And I had Mins, Top, and Target. Then Wan-Bissaka, Shaw, Maguire.
Wow,
So
big Man United. Wow.
And United and Villa block defence. And then midfield, I've got Rafinha, Salah, Fernandes, and Ward-Prowse. Then up front, I have Antonio.
The man. That looks an absolutely fantastic team as well.
I mean,
the only transfer I've probably made early doors is Antonio to like another informed striker.
What are you going to do with Kane? How are you getting Kane in?
Well, it all depends, really. I could, because I got 4 in midfield, I could do Salah or Fernandes.
Okay.
To Kane, maybe, but and another transfer I got planned is probably Antonio to Jimenez, because when West Ham's good run finishes, Wolves, I believe, go on a good run from game week 4, but that depends how well it starts the season. But apart from them 2 transfers, I'm not looking to move anybody on unless they get injured or Yeah,
Unless you can't sit on your hands long enough.
yeah, right.
That's oh, sorry, go on, Luke. You go.
No, I was going to say it's a very nice looking team.
It is.
De Gea is the only one that I've got a question mark on, because I think Hendo's first choice. I just don't. But you've got such an easy sort, because it's the same price, aren't they, Martinez and De Gea? So you stick with 3 and 3 for your blocks. What's the Euro champ being number 1 after bloody 4 weeks? Let's all give up.
It's a lovely looking team, and this is just to highlight the point earlier. You couldn't go, like last season, you couldn't have gone from Salah and Bruno to Kane because we didn't have the 5-3-2 last season. That's the point I was trying to make earlier, how important it is actually that formation is in this season.
Well, there's a more important point, Andrew. So can you just remind me how many of this panel are playing 5-4-1? What formation are you playing?
Well, I messed around with my team just before I put it. I was on 5-3-2, and I was just messing around just before we came on. My team looks rubbish on screen, but I think it's because my players are smaller as well. I'm sticking by that anyway. I've got this smaller on my slide, but the team I've currently got is Martinez in goals. I got Alexander Arnold. I got Shaw, Digne, Firpo, just because he's cheap, and I've got Salah, Bruno, Buendia. I do like. I think Buendia can fit in that.
Really good pick in my opinion.
I think he can fit in that midfield. that whole Rafinha, Tielemans sort of Ward-Prowse kind of mold. I have got Bruno and Salah, right? And I've got Tony and Antonio up front at the moment. I did have Soufal, so I did have a 5-4-1 or 5-3-2 or something, but it's not too bad, but it's not as good as your lot. Your lot, I look at yours after everything's talked about this evening, and I'm like, my goodness, they're the teams I'm entering. I'm not entering mine. It's probably worth saying as well for any new players, you do get 5 teams as well, and if you've only ever played something like FPL or Sky before, it's a very different approach. In Dream Team you get 10 teams, in TFF you get 5. You can afford to put in different sorts of teams. So Owen's one, for example, he's got he's gone all in on Villa and Man United defence. I'm pretty sure another team you'd probably have like Liverpool defence, right? And then and something else as well. So it is worth pointing that out. But that's all our initial drafts. Yeah. Please,
can I just sort of say one thing? It's mainly for the new people. I'm just looking at Owen's team. Yeah. So even though I like Owen's team, if he's not playing in any mini leagues, it's best not to create that team until Saturday, when you get the team news of Man United versus Leeds, because you can enter your team whenever you wish, right up to the kickoff. So because he's got Man United players, you don't have to enter them before the Friday when the Arsenal kick off. You could enter this team or pull it together once you've seen the team news. Yeah. Rather than now, if the team news comes out, I think he would have to use a transfer. Whereas if he created the team on the Saturday, he could go in without any transfers.
Really, really good point there, Carl. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so that is it from us. We have broken our record, gentlemen. 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Let's try and keep it under an hour. 2.5 hours. But it is a pre-season one. We've gone through so much information, and I won't probably do another one now. Like this format is a kind of game where you don't have a weekly one, and I don't even think a monthly one, because our advice is don't use transfers, right? So there's no point in coming every month and saying who's the best players, because our advice in the first half of the season is don't use transfers. So what we'll probably do is come back maybe in a couple of months, and see where we are.
International break, isn't it? Normally when we know who's doing well and all of that
information. Yeah, exactly. But thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me late into the night. And thank you, everyone, for sending in your questions. It is so much appreciated, honestly. It really, it helps steer the conversation. So we really, really do appreciate it. And thank you, obviously, all three of you guys for giving up your time and staying up so late. Luke, where can people find you?
So mostly on Twitter, so it's at FPL_equation there, but there's also at Sky Fantasy Football _Super League as well, where I do a lot of Sky stuff. So mostly on Twitter. I'm on a number of Facebook groups as well, but generally Twitter's the way to get me.
And Carl, where can people get hold of you?
Mainly on Twitter as well, at Darkest Jungle.
Cool. And Owen, where can people get hold of you?
On Twitter at Owen Johnson 1999.
And it's probably worth saying we are all in the Fantasy Football Hub Telegraph WhatsApp chat as well, which I'm pretty sure now after this podcast and in the coming week we'll start to get very, very busy. So my Twitter handle is at FFH_Fergie. So this video recording will be on the Fantasy Football Hub Sky and TFF YouTube channel, with the podcast versions available on all major podcast platforms. If you liked what you watched, we'd really appreciate it if you could press the like button and remember to subscribe to the channel in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. If you enjoyed your listen, please rate the podcast and leave a comment. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, we would really appreciate it if you could just leave a comment, leave us 5 stars. It'd be much appreciated. Our handles on Twitter, Instagram and TikTok are at FFH_HQ, so please follow and feel free to ask us any questions. We will do our best to get back to you. Our website is fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, where you will find everything you need for fantasy football all under one roof, including player comparison tools, the fixture ticker, Opta-stats, top player team reveals, and much, much more. Sky Planning Maestro Ian Parrin has built a Telegraph transfer planner for Hub members, and for premium members, as I mentioned earlier, we have our dedicated Telegraph WhatsApp group where we chat everything to do with Telegraph fantasy football. All the links in the description below to sign up. We've also partnered with ffstuff.co.uk, which Carl mentioned earlier, which also have amazing resources for Telegraph, Sky Fantasy, FPL, Dream Team, Fan Team. And you can also take a look at telegraph.co.uk/fantasy sports, where I give my transfer tips each week. And I also reveal my TFF team and plans each week for Fantasy Football Hub members on the Hub. So if you join in the membership, you've got all this stuff. It's fantastic value. There is currently a pre-season 25% discount off as well. Fantasy Football Hub has you completely covered for everything TFF and fantasy football. So from all of us here at Fantasy Football Hub, stay safe and good night all.